Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 264, 15 lectures on medical botany. This is 186 pages long, so it's full length. Link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. There are also second and third links to my books, blogs, and if it's sort of the botanical homeopathic alternative side of medicine or medical history that you want, I have you covered. Go to the herbal category on either one of the blogs, and you'll see plenty of material there. This particular work by Samuel Robinson, this is from the 1830s, represents a very interesting time in medical history. The earlier period was bloodletting and leechcraft, and some of that's come back now, and the theory of the humors was still in use, and miasmus theory and things of that nature. Germs weren't fully understood. The idea of contagion in a more biological sense was documented. But they still were grappling with how to reconcile that with spirituality, which leads to works like this before roughly the end of the 19th century when more rationalistic works are created. You notice over the course of 40, 50 years is a huge shift. Around the 1870s and 80s is when you really get it. 1830s, though, are great, and this is sort of the dawn of the late pre-modern occult anyway. You can see this with fortune-telling works, a lot of resurgent astrology, some of the latter-day grimoire bric-a-brac material. The Petit Albert wasn't very old at the time. Powwows was barely written in the 1820s. Excellent time for literature, early 1800s, definitely hands down. The basic gist of this particular work, it delivered in 15 sections, is that medicine as it was outdated, which is like a no-brainer, and that it should be replaced, and specifically it talks about the Thomsonian method of botanical medicine. The idea was that, generally speaking, the excuse they use is religious, like the Lord has made every cure, just use plants, the simple people of the third world understand this, look at how much healthier they are, and all they do is they smoke a plant or eat a plant, and they feel better, and their medicine's just as good as ours, look. Other than these diseases over here of Venus that are a big problem, because what had been happening is that the European and diaspora had been using mercury a lot. Mercury, antimony, calomel and things, strong emetics. The thing is, the idea prior in medicine was that to balance the humors, usually purging was required. That meant bloodletting, which is painful, potentially reducing the sanguine nature of the body, causing a person to salivate, to drool basically. Mercury is really good for that. Mercury salts. To cause them to vomit, to cause them to expel from the bowels, to shit themselves. These were considered cleansing. And so the basis of medicine for several hundred years was essentially anything that could be considered unpleasant. Well, of course, we now know the reason your body reacts that way is it's reacting to a poison. Generally speaking, taking arsenic, making you sweat a lot, that's not actually healthy. It's not purging poison, it's adding poison to the body. This work and similar works of the era noticed this connection. Oh, there's all these people, they take mercury, and it's like 50% of them end up with some terrible disorder. They get the brain damage, cankers in their mouth, their gums start rotting away, their teeth fall out, their hair falls out. I mean, what are we doing? It's a strange nature. If the poison is both the poison and the cure, then we are strangely made, not marvelously made. And all of this work is couched in spiritual terms. Constant allusions to the glory of Jesus and God, and how the Savior has lifted people out of disease and stuff. Interestingly, one particular species, in several of these lectures, it's almost all-encompassing towards the end, is spoken of more than any other species, and that's Lobelia. Lobelia is just a simple little innocuous flower, but it has a very long medicinal history. It's also mildly toxic, so keep that in mind. I think ingesting small amounts is still done in a homeopathic setting. Taking larger amounts potentially can cause all sorts of problems, chills and seizures and things. Lobelia is here prescribed for all sorts of stuff, mainly for lung complaints. And of course, at the time, what are you talking about? Tuberculosis. You're talking about a lot of lung complaints. Tuberculosis and attendant pneumonia from other sicknesses. Definitely the most common cause of death at this particular era. Lung complaints, or things that at least outwardly, if you didn't understand germ theory fully, you would assume were fully on lung complaints. That was common back then. This is discussed at length in this book. And the reason why I include this in an occult series, because all of these books that I edit are fundamentally occult, this shows the transference of science from one epoch to another. The casting aside of what was old as superstition, the adoption of what's new, even if we now perceive it as superstitious, as the mainstay of medicine. For instance, now medicine and doctors in general tend to be more on the atheistic side. This wasn't the case. They were taking a more modern system that was less harmful. It is less harmful to give people lobelia than to give them mercury or antimony. Absolutely. Or to dose them up to the eyeballs on arsenic. Or to give them strong emetics until they shit themselves to death in the most literal sense. Oh, you get cholera? Let's make you poop some more. We now know this is a bad idea. It was considered modern a few decades prior, was replaced, and then later replaced by other things. The occult follows through and tries to find truth. Truth can in some cases be an ever-shifting sort of thing. When you're talking about anything within science, like when people say, well, we don't need magic anymore, we got science. This is science. It's 200-year-old science, but it's definitely more rigorous than what came before it. You've got here an early mode of thinking along the lines of modern experimental theory. The idea of cause and effect, the idea of injecting pure reason. Sure, you have all the Jesus stuff, but at the same time, beyond that spirituality and all of the folklore, which is certainly part of it, there's a little bit of an early noble savage folklore sort of mythology here about the simples used by the savage tribes of the world being the proper medicine, and we can see the Saracens and the people, the Moors, use these medicines to greater effect than we Christian Westerners do. You definitely see that, but it's more enlightened than what came in the 18th century, certainly. It's an extremely interesting work, highly recommended. I'm more interested in medical history, especially where it overlaps with herbal remedies than most, but I think that most people would enjoy this work, and it is full length, so it's definitely worth a read. Again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon, second and third links to my books blog. Highly recommended. I mean, there's not much more to say about it. That's about all. Peace out.